All right, folks, this is the South and Sideways podcast on the Urban Sentinel channel. I'm your host, the Urban Sentinel. This podcast episode is 01, the 2024 Crisis Black Swan Event. Let's get into it. Now, the concept of Black Swan events, as many of you have heard and you start hearing more and more about it, it's an unexpected but impactful event, something that is so dramatic, so dire, so overwhelmingly powerful that even the experts either didn't see it coming to the strength and the extent that it did, or people were unaware of it. Now, there have been Black Swan events in our past. I'll even keep it simple, recent past over just the last 20 years. First prime example, 9/11. That was a Black Swan event. No one saw that type of attack coming. The 2008 financial crisis, that was something that, in our day and age of higher technology and enlightened financial advisors and investments and good sound, judgment, you wouldn't think that 2008 would be an issue that it was, but it became that. The COVID-19 pandemic, that was something. We've had bugs and viruses going all around before. We've had outbreaks here and there, but nothing like that specifically circling the globe the way that it did, as fast as it did, and then hitting with such both veracity and variety across the world, where some people would get it and boom, they are done, DOA. Other people would get it and barely miss a beat, keep on moving, and it all varied. And of course, the way it was handled was also a way that impacted and it became a force multiplier for that Black Swan event. But the key thing with those types of events is when they happen, yes, it might be one single event, but it automatically acts like a trigger and causes a cascading effect upon multiple areas. So it doesn't just impact one particular thing. 9/11 didn't just impact the airline industry. It impacted all modes of travel. It impacted all levels of security. It had an effect on people and how they moved about once freely to now greatly restricted, and it continued to grow from there. Surveillance began to pick up, both physical surveillance, security, pat-downs, online surveillance, communications, you name it. Shipping things, just mailing stuff out suddenly became more of a problem because things had to be scanned and checked and ensured that they weren't being portioned off or grouped up into components that could possibly be some type of bomb or other device, and everything continued to grow from there. With our current state right now in 2024 for the United States, but also there are several other countries around the world, it's election period. And I believe right now there are still at least 20 other countries that are holding their elections between right now March going towards November, but we're focusing on the United States, and the election is going to be contentious no matter what. It's not a win or lose situation for one side or the other. It's going to be a lose-lose situation because no matter how you word it, no matter how you phrase it, one group is not going to be happy. And the other group, even if they win, they're not going to be happy because there's not going to be any resolution as far as what they see for what they want in that victory. Now, the risk of certain activities happening in Black Swan events, some of it can be controlled, some of it can be observed, some of it is completely out of our control. You look at geographic regions. Again, natural disasters, that's something that you don't have any control over. And natural disasters happen every place all the time. But those certain types of natural disasters, if we have earthquakes in California, which we do all the time, it's to one extent not a big deal. Now, granted, if California has the big one, that would be a very big deal because of the massive numbers of people that live there, the infrastructure that's tied and connected to it. I don't have the numbers, but I believe California, just as an agricultural state, California is, I believe, the second or the first largest agricultural state in our country. Basically, between them, Texas, and one other state, they basically grow a large majority of the food for the country and globally for exporting. Now, it's not to say that they supply food for the whole world, not on any level, but they contribute a good percentage chunk. If they were to have a major earthquake, something that not only simply just collapsed roads and bridges, but set gas lines to rupture and ignited wildfires, and you have water that was underground in aquifers or running through aqueducts have been demolished, and now there's no flowing water to places that are already arid and depending upon that water, and that agriculture dries up, you're going to talk about an immediate hardship loss. You're going to talk about a loss of the feed crop for a lot of the livestock. You're going to talk about a lot of the cash crop, the wheat, the soy, the rice, the things that brings in California through those sales, the quick, fast money. And that's not something that can be quickly shifted, because although California as a state as a whole is very rich and very fertile, it has defined regions to which only certain things grow well and grow in large numbers. And that's why the industry is built around those areas. So if those get damaged, get destroyed, that can really wreck their economy. And then that will immediately start to affect everything else going down the line across the country. You can look at political aspects here in the United States and other countries. You have divisiveness between political parties, between people of different ideologies, between topics and subjects that, while they both may have, or multiple subjects have an importance, each person views that subject through the lens of their own perspective, that that's the most important thing in the universe to them, and everything else is just ancillary. You can think about a Black Swan event when it comes to pharmaceuticals, both legal and illegal. We've got a growing epidemic of fentanyl in the United States, and it is out of control. And, from my personal perspective, I feel that it's being underreported as far as how many cases of fentanyl deaths and overdoses there are, and also to how much fentanyl is actually being produced or being brought into the country. And you have a pharmaceutical aspect where even on the beneficial end, the actual therapeutics and the life-bettering medications, they're getting very expensive. And the ones that are being pushed and promoted, and I'm sure you've seen it, you see those commercials for a half dozen different types of medications that they're supposed to treat one type of illness or one type of disease. And in the long list of FDA required disclosures of what the side effects may be, unfortunately, just like a lot of things, death seems to be one of the first three that may be on there. And if you listen through them long enough, you'll usually find that it may cause the very symptoms that they are designing the medication to alleviate. And so you almost have to think to yourself, are they really actually trying to help people get better by giving them medications that basically mimic the very symptoms that they're suffering from, to the extent that you can't tell if it's the original disease or if it's the actual medication? And if they live long enough to take the proper dosage for the time they're supposed to take it, do they end up dying at the end because it masked over some other type of effect that wasn't being detected? You can have a Black Swan event with our supply chain. And I won't say we had a Black Swan event when that large cargo ship blocked the Suez Canal, but I will definitely say that that could have been far worse. You have an event like that goes on where that one ship, just one ship, blocked it, and that's all it is. It got a little sideways and got botched up in there, and it took a while to get that straightened out. Now, the other aspect would have been, what if it hadn't just simply blocked it? What if it had been turned, got blocked in there, and then tipped because, I don't know, terrorism, blowing a hole through the side of the hull, causing the vessel to sink, or the cargo on board, goes kaboom in, 10 kiloton style. That would definitely put a permanent halt on travel through that area for a very long time. And things like that, once that happens, people get nervous. Governments get nervous. They think, I don't want to send my cargo through that area, or I don't want to risk sending out my goods that I have to the other countries, knowing that they may not get there and I may lose the merchandise, I may lose the vessel, whatever it is. So they start holding on to it in places where, when they see, especially when it's food, and if you were watching the news over the last year from 2023, you had several countries starting to stock up and reserve much more of their grains and their wheat and their rice and other products that they would normally sell and trade, because they were concerned that at that point, the war with Russia and Ukraine was going to get a bit hotter, and that there may be other conflicts that start to pop up. And, well, you got to eat. And you can't rely on open trade routes during the middle of a hot war where you have multiple nations going at it against each other. One of the things that you have to think about with Black Swan events is, again, some things you can kind of see coming if you do watch the financial market, if you do watch the political structure. Right now, Haiti is in the middle of, well, Haiti is a dumpster fire. That's the easiest way to put it, because their government has left. Everything is out of control. You have gangs running around, controlling the streets, terrorizing people, going to war against each other, and they're in a situation that is a nightmare that I would not wish upon anybody. Now, in cases like that, for them, yes, individually in that country, they are in a black swan event, because that is something major. When your government collapses and they flee, they take off and they say, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya, you're in some deep doo-doo at that point in time. But the effects that it will also have continue to ripple outwards, because you have countries that will go in and will give aid. You will have resources that will be redirected to help them, and that's all well and good. But if the individual countries themselves aren't prepared to either take on refugees or escapees, or if they're not prepared to, roll up their sleeves and put on their boots and get in and get dirty, it's not going to benefit the people of Haiti in any way, shape, or form if all you're doing is dropping stuff off and going, hey, this sucks, but here you go, and then you take off. Now, it's not to say that you have to hold people's hands, and you shouldn't have to do that. There should be a certain level of accountability across the board. Like it or love it, everyone has to, at a certain point, they have to knuckle down and get the job done themselves. But if you are going to take the time to lend a hand to help, then you need to commit to more than just dropping off garbage bags and bottles of water. Now, with that being said, back to our current state here in America with the 2024 election. I would not say the election itself is a black swan event. I will say the election will be part of a black swan event. That's how I will phrase that. I look at it this way. Right now, as it stands, the contender and the incumbent are going to go head to head. And personally, me, I'm not betting on either one. I would rather not. I'm not betting on either one. But as I said before, no matter which one wins, one side is not going to be happy because they lost. The other side, even if they won, are not going to be happy because they are not going to feel that it was a satisfactory win. It wasn't a complete trouncing and pounding. It would still be too close, or I should say it would be close enough to call, but not close enough to be, a clear, hey, this is how it went down. These are the exact numbers, and this is exactly how it folds. Do the math. It's over, and that's that. So you're going to have a lot of people upset about the way it turns out. You're going to have a lot of people that are looking for a fight, waiting for a fight, hoping that something does happen. Now, with that being said, that is the opportunity for someone of bad faith and ill intentions to, start something. And we know that that happens. It happens every place. Anytime you have people on opposite sides of the street shouting back and forth, waiting for that moment, there's always going to be an agitator, someone who really just wants to get things going just for the fact that they either wholeheartedly believe they are in the right and that they are going to win, or they wholeheartedly just want to see people go at it for the sake of watching people go at it. It's sort of like they don't intend to start a fire, but they will stand there and watch everything burn. Now, when we move forward, getting closer and closer, we're not in April yet, but April, May, June starts to get the warm weather. And historically speaking, you can look back over the last just 10 years. Most of all of our major protests, riots, any type of activity that goes on a civilian basis, whether it's people versus the government, people versus people, happens in the warm weather, happens in the hot weather, whatever it is. People are not all-weather protesters. They don't go out in the freezing cold. They don't go out in the snow. They don't go out in the pouring rain. Sunny and mild to reasonably hot, and that is when people like to be out there. That is when they march. That is when they chant. That is when they stand their ground and tell the other side, I'm not backing down from this subject. So I feel that in these upcoming 3 to 4 months, we're going to see a lot of dust starting to get kicked up. We're going to see a lot of fingers get pointed. We're going to see a lot of signs come out and a lot of flags being waved, and it's going to be one of those situations where you just know, you can feel it in the air tonight, like Phil Collins. You know something is going to happen. And depending upon the severity of whatever that is, whether it be internal, generated or externally generated, and I will get into that in a second, the government as it stands is going to have to decide what type of action they're going to take, because they can't flip-flop back and forth. They can't come down heavy hammered fisted for one event and then, shoulder back rub for the other event and then reverse it like an Uno card and go the other way for the other group again. Now, by external event, I mean we have, as Americans, as a country, we have enemies, plain and simple. We have allies and we have enemies. And we have people that are in a nation where they may be ambivalent to us, apathetic to one extent, but we have enemies. And those enemies are smart enough to know that in a one-to-one fight, knocking on the door and challenging us to come outside in the front yard for a fight is not going to work out well for them at all. That's just a proven fact. It's not going to work out the way they want, and they realize this. What they do know, though, is they need to catch us out and about. When we're helping that old lady bring her groceries in, that's the time when they strike, when we're out of our territory, out of our element, and we may not have our full potential with us. That's when we get hit. That's when we get sucker punched. Or they sneak in through the back door and catch us as we're closing the door on that one challenger standing in the front yard, and they catch us on the inside. That was a 9/11 situation. We were plenty well aware and alert of terrorist activity going on around the world near our military bases and our embassies, and we totally dropped the ball on finding out that, they are literally right here in our backyard planning and plotting this entire thing. So coming up to the election, when you start to have protests, you start to have a greater level of civil discourse. You start to have people getting violent with each other, getting violent with law enforcement, destroying government property, threatening other people and other activities going on. The government will crack down. It might be a local crackdown that gets reinforced by the state. And then when you have multiple states doing this exact same thing, the government may say, hey, we've got too many states with too many of the same issues. We're going to have to put a big blanket over this entire party and beat it into submission. And then you start getting into the martial law aspect of it. When you have a situation like that, things can be bad. If you think about the Boston bombers, when that happened, they locked the city down. Great, you're looking for them. You have an idea of where they are. But that search ring kept expanding and kept expanding and kept expanding to the extent that wherever you last saw them, and based upon where they were found, they were locking down neighborhoods that were well outside that circle of potential hiding. They were going door to door, floor to floor, clearing everyone out and bringing them out into the streets, checking every single person, every single house, every single yard, doing that one by one, block by block by block. So the aspect that it can't be done, that by itself proved that it can be. Now, the effectiveness of it, if they're looking for a person, an individual, one person of interest, or people in a small group, sure. But when you have a large mob, hundreds of people to tens of thousands of people, they're not going to be able to do that. They're just going to have to shut the entire city down, fence everything off. No one gets in, no one gets out, and they'll figure out what they're going to do from that point forward. If you have adversaries, as I said before, on the outside, they may see that as an advantage, and especially if they already have operators within our country, people that are just literally brought in. They live a regular everyday life. Maybe they skulk around here and there at power plants and other places, but effectively speaking, they stay out of trouble. They don't get arrested. They don't really cause any problems. They become that neighbor in the apartment building or down the street that waves hello and chats briefly, but always keeps to themselves, but not in that weird loner sort of way where if you're too quiet and you keep too much to yourself, people tend to want to know more about you. They want to see you more often. They want to see what you're doing. But if you come out, you mow your lawn, you talk for a little bit on the corner to the mailman, you walk your dog or whatever it is, they just figure, it's a solitary kind of person, we just leave them be, and off they go. Those are the exact people that could very well be here already waiting for that call to happen. And they not necessarily have to wait for a call. It may be plain and simple. When they know that this is what's happening, when they see that we are at a point where we are about ready to break and we are going to go at it with each other, they just may simply take on their own individual activities, and that may be their orders is, weapons free, do what you need to do. It might be something as dramatic as, a chemical bomb. It might be something a little bit more subtle, like, something in the water. It could be, a mass shooting. It could be whatever it is to cause chaos and confusion, to start stacking up bodies and to point the blame at one side or the other, because that's a key thing. You make it look like it's the other side, then you have pretty much open season on everyone, because that's a hell of a lot easier for one political back party to blame the other political back party for something, and then people just simply go at it. They look for the person with that bumper sticker. They look for the person with that political banner on their lawn. They look for the person with the flag on the flagpole, and they decide that's the problem right there. There's the target. We're going after them. And then those rogue agents, all they have to do at that point is blend back into the background, keep their head low, just like they were doing before. And, if worse comes to worse, they play the, hey, I'm just an innocent person trying to stay out of this. I didn't know anything. I didn't see anything. I have no involvement in anything, until they get ready to slip away or, go someplace else to cause trouble. You could have access from outside countries coming in a more overt way, literally like we're having right now, coming through the open border, and they might be coming through prepped and ready. They cross the border with their backpacks full of gear. So as soon as they get in, they've got internal contacts. I mean, if you think about just think about the drug cartel in Mexico and in Central and South America. They control, and I say control, they control countries, acres worth of land from one end to the other. Thousands of people work for them. Many of them work for them willingly because they have no other choice. Begrudgingly or not, they do the job that they're told to do because they don't want to end up dead. Many people work for them and don't realize it because they just think they're doing whatever job they're doing, not understanding that you're contributing to their cartel, their empire, their growth. They have plenty of people in the U.S. that are regular connections, that are part of their organization. Here in the U.S., been in the U.S., live all over the place. They're not just hanging around south of the border. They are all the way up, Minneapolis, Minnesota, Bakersfield, California, Boston, Massachusetts, you name it. Well, if those people are given instructions on, we need this to happen in your area, or when this goes down in your area, contact these people and get these groups over here and get this going, whatever it is to sow chaos. And that's a key thing. Chaos, you don't need a lot of work to get it done. You don't need to expend a lot of energy to create havoc and panic. You just have to have the right timing. You time it right, and a little bit of chaos goes a very, very long way. It's sort of like you have a bunch of 5-year-olds that are all allergic to bee stings, and you put a fake bee in a room and close that door, and just before you close it, you yell bee. It sounds cruel, and I'm sure some people are upset by that visual, but that's what it is. It's just simply, you only need a little bit of chaos to go, and you get that started, and it will run on its own. Even if it's beyond the capability of what you originally planned, you just get that in motion, and it will run on its own. So with that being said, you could have anything, a cyber attack that hits the financial sector. Maybe it makes the banks nervous, so they start shutting down. We got to check our network systems and our infrastructure to make sure there aren't any other viruses. So banks and credit card companies and ATMs aren't going to be operational for 3 days, maybe 4 days. And then during that same window period, a couple of the transformer stations across the country get hit. It doesn't cause a nationwide blackout, but it does cause major power losses to several regions of the country. Well, that needs to be checked out because that's definitely suspicious. And they say, oh, yes, this is definitely suspicious, and we're going to be investigating. So now at this point, you can't get any money, and you may be living in an area without power or near an area without power. Then you find out that, oh, there's been a chemical spill in several water reservoirs across the country. That is definitely an act of terror. We are being attacked by terrorists. Well, now you're afraid to drink the water because you're not sure, has your water supply already been contaminated and you just don't know it, or it hasn't gotten to you yet. So that may cause municipal water supplies to shut down until they can check and treat and clean and scrub everything just to make sure. You start doing small little things like that, you're going to build up the level of chaos that you need for people to then panic. They start seeing the boogeyman around every corner. They start seeing shadows at high noon. It doesn't matter. They're going to see it and they're going to act upon it. And even with the experts that we have, they're at a certain point going to be without a solid plan. So they're just going to start reacting and start moving in on the playbook of, okay, if we're not sure about it, arrest it. If we can't arrest it, well, shoot it down and we'll figure out what we did wrong afterwards. And that, unfortunately, is what tends to happen when the senses get overwhelmed, get overloaded, and the brain cannot process everything properly, it starts to fill in the blanks, the spaces that it hasn't analyzed yet, with past events, with things that are similar to it but not quite it. And your brain starts to make the spaces and the gaps smaller by filling it with all of those things. And not all of it is correct. Not all of it is timely. Not all of it is something that needs to be in there in the first place. And you spread that out over a couple of million people, you're going to have that recipe for disaster real quick. And as we all know, with rumors and hints and allegations and speculation, those things can get out of control. And believe me, I am a fan of speculation. And speculation is exactly what everyone does. Some people don't like to call it that. Some people don't like to think about that. But unless you are absolutely first person present with an event that happened, you don't know. Everything is speculation until you can verify. And for many people, there's no way to verify it. You can tell me that you saw this and you heard this and that. Great. And I can take it on good faith and believe that that's exactly what happened. I have no way to prove it. I can also take it in good faith that you're telling me what you saw from the perspective that you saw, what you experienced from your point of view, but I may speculate otherwise. And from that point, if I tell someone else what you said and you told to me, like that game telephone, that message changes just a little bit, each and every single person that goes through it. And you imagine with our age of communication, where one person, one tweet, one posting on Instagram, whatever it is, that goes out to 1,000 people, and that 1,000 becomes 10,000 to 100,000 to 1,000,000 people in less time than it takes to go and make a grilled cheese sandwich. And you've got an entirely different set of people reacting to an event that didn't actually happen, but it has gone so deep that you cannot find the original truth to the actual matter. And even with the advent of being able to trust and verify through other sources, going through multimedia networks, going through live cams and things like that, people that are right there in the moment, you still have to disseminate whether or not they are actually where they are, who they are, doing what they say they are, and whether the event has been sterilized, sanitized, or altered in many cases. Because as we've seen, even with our major media networks, depending upon how they want to cover one particular story or one particular subject, literally the angle of the camera and the questions that are asked can change the entire dynamic. I've seen photographs of rallies where when you're watching that reporter on the screen, that rally is packed to the hilt. You can't see anything but a sea of people and arms and heads. And then you inadvertently see a camera angle from a different network in that same exact area at the same exact time. And you see that that crowd that was in front of that first reporter was herded into a small pen area. And there may have been 60 to 100 people, but nowhere the hundreds of people that were purported, because it's the perspective that's presented to support the narrative. So with a Black Swan event, although the event itself may be real, how it is presented to the general public, how it is perceived by the general public, makes that true determination on how it's going to impact everyone else from that point going forward. Now, sure, yes, an earthquake is still an earthquake without a doubt. There's no getting around that. Tornado, no problem. Nuclear reactor getting hit by a tidal wave. All those things are real. I'm not saying that the events weren't real. I am just simply saying that the perspective on how that event occurred and what that event is currently doing or has the capability of doing is what makes the difference in how people behave towards it. So you can have a non-event and hype it up with just the right amount of energy, and suddenly that same non-event that isn't a real critical thing becomes a bigger event as it spreads through the crowd, as it spreads through the public domain, because the people that aren't actually there and can't get there to either counter it or verify that, yeah, it is exactly like they say, or it is worse than they say, and they're trying to downplay it. Either way, that's when you get the panic going on. And you have to remember, with fact checking, sometimes you can't. It's just impossible to do. Sometimes you cannot fact check. You don't have the capabilities. You either have to take it as it is and just say, look, they're either telling the truth, or they're at least telling some semblance of the truth, or they're outright lying. And, either way, you have no way to know. So you have to be able to plan accordingly. And within those plans for Black Swan events, it's actually pretty simple. You have to consider that for the most part, you're either dealing with something that is environmental or economic or physical. And in many cases, all three kind of loop together, almost like a Venn diagram. An environmental situation, natural disasters, those always, come up, but that also acts on the physical, because you may be in the physical area of that event and you may have to leave. And you have to think about how would you leave, or if you can't leave, how are you going to survive when you stay? If you think back to Hurricane Katrina, that was a natural disaster event. That was a Black Swan event on a smaller scale. Because I feel, honestly, one, a lot of the problems that they had, and this is armchair quarterback stuff, but a lot of the problems that they had when it comes to evacuation comes down to three things. One, they did not have an evacuation plan because they did not have a capability of getting the number of people that lived in the high floodplain areas right down in the center of New Orleans out of that area and to locations that are safer away. Their idea of going into the Superdome. Yeah, you go into the Superdome when it's one levee. You go into the Superdome when it's, a hurricane coming. You don't go into the Superdome when, effectively speaking, 2/3 of the city is already flooded and the storm isn't quite over yet as far as like the water damage and all the rain and runoff and everything going on. You have an evacuation plan. You have city buses and school buses set up to your different districts, and people just get on the damn bus and we're taking you north. We're driving north, up the highway, up the side roads, whatever it is, for the next 20 miles to get people out of the area. And we're stopping at all of these motels that we've already verified and vetted, and they're going to start taking people in for housing. We're going up to these Walmarts and we're pulling into the parking lots. You get your water, you get your food, you get your medical care, whatever the case may be. Instead of, if you're going to stay, you got to be careful. It's like the water is 12 feet deep and moving at 10 miles an hour. And that was not a plan that was going to work out for just staying there and being careful. But you have those disasters, and sometimes they get ahead of people and it gets out of control. You have the economic aspect of it where, yes, a financial crisis, a stock market crash will definitely affect a lot of people. And you have to think about in the ways that it will affect. You have a stock market crash similar to the one in the 1930s. A person that has $100 million in their bank account and it's tied up in various things, and the stock market crashes and they go from $100 million down to $1 million. Yeah, it sucks for them. As far as they're concerned, their entire world is over. They just lost $99 million in a blink of an eye. If I've got $1,400 in my bank account, well, one, that is a good day. And if whatever I have is in there at that $1,400, guess what? I don't have anything invested in the stock market. I'm not losing anything. Now, when it comes to trying to pay my mortgage, when it comes to taking care of certain bills, if those companies that I pay the money to are in a financial situation, then that's a different situation. They may suddenly say, hey, we're raising the interest rates on this and we're raising the interest rates on that, or we've made a new policy that you need to pay 2 months of mortgage every month in advance for the next 6 months. Whatever it is, they're going to figure ways so they can start recouping some money fast. And if I miss a payment, if I'm short a dollar, whatever it is, they will be very quick, as we've seen before, many places, to start that whole eviction process and foreclosure on a property just because I came up short that week. Now, many people during COVID, they lost their jobs. Their companies folded, so the places they were employed were no longer in existence, and they fell into some financial troubles very, very fast because of that. You can take that same example, and that can happen in a major market crash. That could happen with a cyber attack that shuts down the financial system for more than just 2 or 3 days of operation, that those 3 days become 3 weeks, and at that point, everything is falling apart. On the plus side, and it's not a guarantee, but on the plus side, if that many places are losing out on that much money, to one extent or another, if you're a little fish, just keep on swimming. Literally, just keep on swimming. They're not going to catch you. They're looking at that point, they have to cut major losses, and they're not going to try to scramble up every single household and tiny condo that they own. Berkshire and Hathaway own a lot of property, as a perfect example. They own a lot of property, and they buy up a lot of houses and a lot of small buildings and a lot of commercial businesses, and they are all over the map. If they run into a financial situation, they're going to be selling off the stuff that makes them the most money, which are the bigger commercial properties. They may sell it at a discount. They may sell it just a hair's breadth above a loss, but they will start cutting those losses faster, because you're not going to take a house where one person can barely afford it to expect to sell it to someone else who can barely afford it. And even if you look at those multimillionaires that do go from $100 million down to $1 million, they take those $1 million, Well, they've already sold off all their other assets to make up the difference. So they've already sold their house down in Florida and their ski lodge up in Colorado, and they've sold their yacht that they keep docked over in Massachusetts, and they've sold the other yacht that they have docked over in San Diego. So they've already started to cut those losses. They've bumped up their portfolio again. They've got some cash to walk around in. They're not going to settle for a Berkshire Hathaway $120,000, 1,500 square foot house in the suburbs of some rinky-dink town. They're not going to do that. So they're not coming for you. Now, that's not to say that if there is a financial collapse that you shouldn't still try to have money available to pay your bills, because you don't know how quickly it may correct, or in fact, if it immediately affects you and your situation. Because, well, that would be a point of embarrassment if you're like, oh, the stock market collapsed, I don't have to worry about paying the mortgage, and you blow it off for the month, and then you get a letter within a week saying, yeah, you didn't pay your mortgage, and so we've already started the process, and you will be evicted because we're foreclosing on you ASAP. And suddenly what could have been avoided now becomes your own little Black Swan event, because now you're scrambling to figure out what you can do to assuage them and get them to give you that second chance, that better opportunity to make the correction on the error that you made. Moving into the areas that you think about when it comes to Black Swan events and prepping, emergency preparedness pretty much covers all the basics. It may be a case of, do you have enough food and water to last you, 3 days? Good. Now get it up to 3 weeks, and at the most minimum 3 months. That's really what it comes down to. Whatever it is, if you can afford to ride it out for 3 months where you don't have to worry about, one, the increasing cost of groceries every single time you go to the grocery store. You don't have to worry about starving, and especially when you have a family to take care of, that's the last headache you want, is to sit and watch your family pretty much starve to death because you can't afford any food. Now, you may be in a financial situation right now, and everyone is different, but whatever you can double coupon, buy one, get one, whatever the case may be, you go ahead and you do that. And you get what you need to get. Put it aside, a little bit here, a little bit there. When it comes to saving money is a difficult thing to do. There are plenty of times where my family and I, we have saved money, and just when we think, hey, we've got a little bit of extra money, we either go out and have a little fun, or make that purchase that we thought about making last year, whatever the case may be. And as soon as that check clears, as soon as that money is gone, radiator problem with the vehicle, furnace problem in the house, something else breaks, and suddenly it's not covered by insurance, so it's cash out of pocket. It's one of those things where it always happens. It almost makes you not want to, live a little, but sometimes you do. But if you can save a little bit of cash here and there, I had gotten into the habit, kind of fell out of it, but I had gotten into the habit of any spare change from anything that I had. At the end of the night, I took it out of my pocket, put it into a jar, and it would just go in there. It didn't amount to a lot, but it kept me in the habit of just putting a little bit more away. We weren't going out to be able to buy a week's worth of groceries with it, but sometimes when you just needed $4 for this or $5 for this, especially when my children were much younger, the schools always send the kids home, oh, make sure your child has $2 for this and $3 for this. And you end up, patting yourself down, checking your wallet, and then you remember, oh, I've got some in this jar over here. And I have not done that in years, but on a personal aspect, I feel I need to start doing that, if for nothing else, just for buying more things for my preps and things that I want to get and have taken care of. Because with these events as they are, I feel that we are definitely in a point where something is going to happen. And even if nothing in the aspect, and I mean this in a very, very loose termed way, if nothing eventful happens during this year, I will be pleasantly surprised. But I am highly skeptical that we are going to go an entire year without some major event or catastrophe, man-made, natural, combination of both, doesn't matter, through 2024. It is just the cycle of human beings and the way that things go. It's inevitable that something will go down, and I won't be surprised by it. I might be impressed by it. I might be, oh, that was impressively unexpected, or I thought it was going to happen. I didn't realize it was going to be quite like that. Whatever the situation is, I'm not going to be shocked by it. It's just simply a matter of when it actually does happen. Does it happen the way that I envision it, the way that I imagine it will be? Or is it kind of lackluster? Or is it way over the top, almost to the point of excess, like it's a Michael Bay film where it's just a little too loud, a little too much, a little too intense for what you're dealing with? But with that being said, Black Swan events are definitely something that we as individuals need to keep in mind. You don't have to spend hours every night scanning and scrolling and researching all of the different events and news topics that are going on. You don't have to put up a poster board and start drawing red string lines connecting to certain people, certain governments, certain countries, certain activities, finding the parallels to past events that went on, looking for those hidden cycles within the cycles within the cycles. And yes, some of that stuff is definitely interesting because some of it can be broken down and explained in a simple fashion where you start to see certain patterns and you realize that there's a certain pulse, a certain beat to our world, to our environment, to our economy, to the way we interact. And it does move along within certain areas of financial markets, of the geography of people moving and migrating due to environmental conditions and due to industrial conditions. So it does play into that. And there are times where certain things converge and you end up having an event, a disaster, or some anomalous action that only happens that one time, but that one time changes the beat. It changes the beat, it changes the pulse, and a new rhythm starts. And then it's a matter of trying to figure out what this new cycle, what this new rhythm is going to be, and to see where those patterns start to fall into. And every single time there's a major event like that, that's what you have to think about. Is you have to think our normal world, our normal global society beats on a pulse. These Black Swan events are like an arrhythmia. They're that heart stopper for that fraction of a second, that boom, and then it starts back up again, but it's just off beat from the last one. So now a new rhythm starts, and you have to think about when that next beat, that pause is going to happen. Or is it going to be a heart attack? Is it going to be something that's going to be the death knell and it's going to be over? Or is it going to be something that's that numbing pain in the chest that you kind of feel that maybe you should have it taken a look at because it might not be heartburn? And that's all I got for you on this one. Feel free to check out the next upcoming podcast, and I will catch you in the next one.